LGH, and welcome to the fourth session in Leading for the New Now. For those of you who are new to LGH, welcome. And for all of those who are regulars, hey, we're delighted to have you. As you might already know, we're a nonprofit community leadership organization with deep roots in the Hartford region and beyond. We are conveners of people on important and relevant topics, and that is how this new virtual series, Leading in the New Now, was born. It was in response and in service to our network during this new environment we're all navigating and experiencing. So we're all in the same storm, but having different experiences. So we hope this series provides you with new tools and perspectives. And if you have ideas on future topics, share that feedback in the session feedback form that you'll get after the session. And if you'd like to have a customized leadership training or considering customized leadership training for yourself or for your organizations, feel free to reach out to me. So this new virtual series would not be possible at all without the generous support of our investors. So I want to thank our Summit alumni, Colleen McGuire, hello Colleen, from Fern Healthcare for sponsoring today's session and making this all possible. For more information about Fern, the link to the website is available in the chat. So throughout today's session, you're encouraged to send your questions via the chat feature, make comments, and that's how we will communicate with each other. Your mic will be muted, but you're welcome to send your thoughts, comments, and insights directly to the chat. Fern, our VP of Marketing and Communication, and Destiny Davis, Program Coordinator and extraordinaire of all things, will respond to you. And they'll let me know if you have a question. So today's session is also made possible with the generous investment of our visionary sponsors. We thank you for your partnership and commitment to excellence and in leadership. So we encourage you to connect with us on all our social media handles. We always have good news to share on our platform, so stay connected and stay inspired even after today's workshop. Now, without further ado, mindfulness and resilience in times of crisis. What's interesting is we had 300 people register for this session today. So I think we are all, mindfulness is top of mind for all of us. So without further delay, I'm delighted to welcome today's workshop facilitator, Peter Callahan. Peter works to unleash the potential in leaders and teams and to heal suffering through mindfulness. He does this through coaching and leadership training through Fresh Perspectives, which he founded in 2014, and as the Leadership and Engagement Director at Copper Beech Institute in West Hartford, Connecticut. And he's also the Northwest Connecticut 40 Under 40 Award winner, and he is also in the LGH Quest program this year. So welcome, Peter, friend of mine, Peter Callahan. Let's give up jazz hands, everybody. Nice welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Karen. Vietnamese monk and peaceful activist Thich Nhat Hanh has written, "We are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness." So welcome, everyone. Such a gift to be with you this morning. Again, my name is Peter, and I am a fellow human being. And personally, I'm experiencing some pretty significant challenges right now, as Karen referenced, and as we all do as part of this human experience. Though our different identities and our privilege, our level of privilege, can really change how we're experiencing the storm. So evolutionary biology tells us that our brains and our bodies evolved for very different environments than we find ourselves in right now. Yet our programming, this internal wiring that's built into us, has changed very little. And we want the same things our ancestors did. At least I'm pretty sure, I haven't talked to them, but we want to feel safe. right? We want to feel healthy. We want to feel a sense of belonging. It's totally normal. But when we wake up and look around, we see policies created with greed and behavior normalized by fear. Capacities we all have inside of us. And as leaders, we all have the capacity to change. And I believe mindfulness is a wonderful, really fundamental practice that can help us start to see ourselves a little bit more clearly so that we can then act a little bit differently in the world. So before we fully dive in, I would love to, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself and Copper Beech and some background, but I'd love for us to just start together the way we start most of our meetings at Copper Beech, and many of our partners and organizations around the world do the same. And that's just with the moment to acknowledge our transition, especially right now, right? There's so much going on in the world, in our lives, and up until noon today, how much you might have done this morning. So we just want to acknowledge whatever is happening in us and take a moment to settle in to where we are right now and what our intention is maybe for today. So it's important to just let you know I'm happy to give a little bit of guidance here. Often we just simply take a minute, everyone's quiet, and then we get the meeting started. But I'll offer a few suggestions. Please know these are simply suggestions or invitations. I don't want to have you do anything that doesn't feel safe or useful or appropriate for you right now. So just keeping that in mind. So I'll invite you to just lower your gaze right now. We don't need to look at the screen. And maybe even closing your eyes if that feels comfortable for you, only if it feels right. And maybe taking a moment to take a slightly deeper than normal breath. You might notice any thoughts going through your head right now. Not needing to make them good or bad, just noticing. Maybe checking in with your current mood, emotions, just anything that's coming up right now. Seeing if you can just acknowledge whatever that is. Oh yeah, hunger, it's lunchtime, or oh yeah, a lot of emails, Hope he's done a little more quickly. All right, whatever's coming up, it's totally fine. And then if you can, maybe just checking in with your body for a moment. You know, that thing below your neck that carries you around all day and helps us do all the things we need to do. Maybe seeing if there's any tension or discomfort. And if you care to, just giving that permission to release and let go, or even get up and move if you need to, or stretch. Yeah, I'm just trying to set ourselves up to be as present for this next little while together as we can. Maybe just taking a few last breaths as we come back together. Thank you so much. Has anyone here joining today, has anyone tried meditating before? Has anyone done it? I know I can't see everybody, but awesome. I'm just going to ask everyone on the call to raise your hand, even if your video is not up, you just put it up for me, because you've all at least tried it now, right? We've done it. So if you need to drop off, go eat lunch, that's totally fine. We've at least experimented and tried it out. You don't have to believe anything I say. It's about that experience that you've had, and it doesn't have to be blissful and wonderful. We'll talk more about that. But thank you all for your courage. Really appreciate it. So in business, we talk a lot about resourcing. Maybe we use that word, maybe we don't. But having the resources, the people, the processes, the partners and vendors that we need to get our work done and be effective, we don't spend much time on inner resourcing. right? So these are the qualities and skills that give us greater capacity to lead, to be effective, to communicate. And this is really what mindfulness and resilience and even compassion can really help us to cultivate, these inner resources. So for those of you in human resources, or who are also in the learning and development fields like I am, you probably want to focus on these things more, or maybe you don't, but this has come up before. It's often not a priority in our organizations, right? We try and squeeze it in when we can, and obviously those of you joining Leadership Greater Hartford today have made it even more of a priority, and really, really grateful for that intention of yours. But most companies are focused on the bottom line, a return on investment. Right? They're less focused on these inner skills, and we're going to do our best to let go of the term soft skills in our whole industry, right? Because that really does not give justice to the effectiveness. And we're seeing more and more research coming out between fMRIs, and I'll talk a little bit about the neuroscience today. But there is more evidence and there's more practice going on, but we're still very far away from the level of, how much volume would potentially give us the maximum ROI. So when you think of the most admired, successful companies out there, what are some of the organizations that come to mind? Who do you think of right away? So maybe it's Apple or Amazon or Starbucks. I'm not saying any are perfect, but these companies clearly have figured some things out and they're doing things well. One of the top companies that I think many of us think of is Google. I think Google has this program. It has a wait list for several years. Their most popular training program is called Search Inside Yourself. It's now spun off into a nonprofit called Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. But this is the most popular program at Google for 10 years running. And that tells us something about what some of these most effective business people and leaders are valuing and prioritizing, right? And this is actually much of what we've modeled our leadership program off of. And we're really excited today to speak to the partnership that Leadership Greater Hartford and Copper Beech have established. And just teasing it here, we'll speak to that a little bit more later. But really excited to be doing this work. And again, it's happening in so many other organizations. Leadership and mindfulness go together, and I think Stephen Covey sums it up really nicely here. One of the main priorities I think that we can focus on a little bit differently. So what he says is that leadership is communicating to people their worth and potential so clearly that they come to see it in themselves. Like we said about our ancestors, right? We all want to feel seen and valued, right? And we need to acknowledge our own worth and potential so that we can then be of service to showing others theirs. And so this work is as much about helping to heal ourselves, and I'll speak to that in a moment as well, as it is to help heal others and help them feel the value that they bring and help show them how much potential they have so that we can all continue to grow and collaborate together. Just really love this quote. And there's so many humans out here already doing this work. Dan Harris, who does 10% Happier, maybe some of you are aware of him, speaks to the elite subculture that is now meditating, right? So almost every Olympic athlete, the US Marines, the UN, hedge fund manager Ray Dalio speaks to the impact on him. The late Kobe Bryant, how much this helped his basketball greatness in life. From Oprah to Bill Gates to so many thousands of others that have now come out and spoken to how much these practices have benefited them. And this is just a small sample of the organizations that we've had the privilege of collaborating with and partnering with. There are so many more out there. We've worked with over 150 already over our short 5+ years. And it's just amazing to see these open-minded, open-hearted leaders start to really value these practices. And again, so much of it comes from the research. So you don't have to buy into any, large ideas to trust that, wow, this may really work. And again, it's about your experience as we already tried it out. And for some folks, this isn't the practice for them, and that's okay too, right? But there's many different ways to train our attention to help us be more focused and a little bit more relaxed, at least at times. So at Copper Beech, really our mission is about healing suffering. And I sort of mentioned this word healing before, and I want to make sure we bridge the gap between healing and leadership, because it really is combined. We do this in a few different ways, both through our sort of regular programming, retreats and courses. Maybe you've heard of the 8-week course, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. So this is the original course that came out of UMass Medical School that really all the research has stemmed from here in the West anyway. And we also do a lot of work in the community. So we go out and work at Hartford Correctional Facility, first with the inmates, but then the correctional officers wanted to work too. So we work with them every year. We're working with the Chrysalis Center, homeless folks, as well as survivors of domestic abuse, addiction, the opioid crisis. So we're doing that work through some really generous funders and donors. I know some of you are on here today. Thank you so much. And then I have the honor of managing and leading our mindfulness in the workplace, right? So this is where we sort of bridge this gap between a mindfulness center, which some people will never go to a meditation center, right? That's way outside of their comfort zone, and that's totally fine. But we can meet people where they are, right? This can be integrated, just like those other companies you just saw, integrated into the work we're already doing. We don't need to have this whole separate initiative. And school systems that we work with, I think, exemplify this really well. Mindfulness really is a great foundation for the social emotional learning curriculums that are out there. It's really, really an honor to get to do this work. It's really important also for me to share that we don't believe that mindfulness is a silver bullet and the cure to all of our ills, especially acknowledging all that's happening in the world today, and we're seeing the suffering up close to a whole different degree. There are many aspects that go into our healing and our growth. So this is a little pie chart just to help us think about some of the aspects, and this isn't even all inclusive, right? But some of the pieces. And really the key here is it's not just about learning, right? We can read a lot of books, we can come to these trainings, this is wonderful, but it's the actual practice, the lived experience, and some degree of discipline and habit building to find what works for us and what does help us to do some of this healing work. So again, we can really bring our leadership to another level. This is absolutely not how I started. So my amazing Quest classmates and some of you here have heard me share, but it's really true, and that is that I am a recovering jerk. I spent many years just not treating people well, being extremely judgmental, not listening when people are talking, having a lot of arrogance that, eventually I've learned through this work was really built on top of insecurity, right? And some of this, healing work that I hadn't done that I was then projecting onto others to try and keep myself safe and protected. And what really helped me was after college, I started reading. That was my initial path. I gratefully had some really courageous friends who held up the mirror and said, "Hey, Pete, your behavior, you're really kind of being an asshole. What's going on?" And I hated it, right? It was really tough to take, and yet I heard it enough to say, all right, maybe there's something different I can do. So I picked up the first audiobook I actually listened to was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In that book, he shared this quote from Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor in World War II, spent 4 years helping people survive, trying to understand the human condition. And when Stephen shared this quote from Viktor, it just washed over me. Like I pulled over to the side of the road and just sort of saw that, wow, maybe this is how I can start to be a little bit less of a jerk. It's pretty incredible. So what Viktor said was that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our freedom to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So between what happens and how we respond or react to what happens, we have a choice, right? There is this space. And this space is actually the muscle that we are exercising when we meditate. We are growing our ability to respond. So my example of this, so I pulled back out into the road after hearing this. I was like, wow, my life's gonna be different. Like I'm just gonna use that space. A couple minutes later, somebody cuts me off. I immediately, finger goes up, I'm laying on the horn, yelling out the window. No space, right? No space. The stimulus, that person being inconsiderate, and my response was just in me, right? This is conditioned in me after years of watching others do it, and just, I didn't feel like I had any control over that response. I was like, oh, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. So let me define these terms for us just for a moment, and sort of we'll see how they relate back to sort of what we're dealing with right now. So mindfulness, one definition anyway, is paying attention to what's happening right now, hopefully without judgment, or with as little judgment as we can foster. Resilience, and what mindfulness helps us to do, is build our resilience so that when things like someone cutting us off, like getting an angry email happen, we might still have that response, right? I still get angry when I get cut off sometimes. Maybe I grip the steering wheel a little harder, but I notice that anger come up and my finger no longer goes up. I promise. It's been a long time since I flicked someone up, right? Because I've been training this muscle over and over and over again. It's taken a decade, basically. And one helpful distinction can be that meditation is this formal practice, right? We did just a little bit of it earlier. We'll do a little bit more at the end. Mindfulness is our ability to use that in the real world, right? We don't meditate to be better meditators. It's not about stopping our thoughts, as you'll see in a few minutes. We meditate so that we can be better humans. And if we're mindful, we're making the choice of what being a better human looks like, right? We're paying attention to what's happening, doing our best not to judge and take in the facts, and then respond in whatever way feels best to us, right? And that's our resilience, is our ability to have something happen that we don't like or that's really uncomfortable, and to still be able to choose our response, or at least more quickly, right? At first I was still flicking people off, but right away I'd feel a little bit, oh, all right, I don't want to do that, maybe next time, right? And it takes time, it takes training and practice. Another way we relate to this is autopilot, right? We are so often, our mind is wandering. Harvard did a study that shows that about 50% of the time we are awake and not paying attention to what we're doing. And some of the time this is useful, but other times it can be really risky, right? And really dangerous. So I'm going to take 2 minutes and give you a quick neuroscience lesson to help understand this. All right, so everybody ready to be a neuroscientist with me for a minute? So I'm going to use Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. I love this. I think it's really helpful. It works great with kids or CEOs, whoever you want to use it with. And it just shows the brain kind of from the side, so you can see the image on the right-hand side here. And if you think about the front of your brain as the newest part, right, this is your prefrontal cortex, then you've got your cortex, this middle section. We're really just going to focus on our thumb, which is the amygdala, right, that fight, flight, freeze response. And then down below is our brainstem, right, kind of the oldest part of our brain. So has anyone ever gotten in a fight with a family member? No one. Excellent. Really mindful group we've got here. Right, got in a fight with a family member, and then 5 minutes or 5 hours later, kind of thought back on it and said, wow, I really wish I didn't say that. Or even, why did I call this person that I love so much a terrible human? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't actually believe that. So what's happening when we're stressed, when we're angry, when we're scared? What do you notice? Our heart starts beating a little faster, right? Our breath gets more shallow. And so our body's actually releasing cortisol, the stress hormone, right? It's starting to build up, and it's helping us be more focused, right? Our focus gets more narrow. We're not thinking as broadly. And our prefrontal cortex, which really helps our decision making, right? It helps us integrate all this knowledge that we've been learning over our lives. Eventually, as that cortisol goes up, our prefrontal cortex just goes offline. When there's enough cortisol, it's like, wow, clearly you're in life-threatening danger here. So you flip your lid. So you flip your lid, and this is what kids really get this. Like, hey, Mom, I'm about to flip my lid. I think I need a minute. Like, yeah, oh, great. That's fair. That happens to all of us. Like, why don't you take a moment? What's going to help with that? Right? And taking a couple deep breaths. Right? Stepping back for a moment, not hitting send on your email. Right? Can really help us to regulate our nervous system, right? To bring that prefrontal cortex back online so that ultimately we can respond instead of react. That is what we're doing in these practices. And you're now a neuroscientist, and you can share this with anyone, right? Jan Siegel's got a great YouTube video, 5 minutes, much better than I would do. Feel free to check it out. But so this is what's happening. And some of that research actually shows that the gray matter in our prefrontal cortex is growing as we keep doing these repetitions. And we're going to practice them here in a minute. Right? Just back and forth, back and forth. Our mind wanders, no problem. Whenever we notice, we bring it back. And we've grown that gray matter a little bit. And this honestly helps me every morning when I practice. Sometimes it doesn't feel great, and the last thing I want to do is sit there and follow my breath or pay attention to the sound. It just, it doesn't feel exciting or interesting, and yet I'm trusting that this is helping, right? So that I have that space, and I've noticed my wife would not let me stop meditating at this point, for sure. All right, so that was a lot. Thank you for letting me get through that. Now I want to give us another experience, right? If we're open to it, let's try this out. Give us another chance to have our own experience and just see what it's like. So this is one way to think about a meditation practice. And as I was referencing before, we want to just find an anchor or a focal point to keep our attention on. The breath is a really common one for many reasons, right? It's always here with us. It also stimulates our vagal nerve, which is what actually helps to reduce that cortisol release and slow us down, right? And it also has some physical sensations, and I'll guide you through a few of those as we go. So that can be helpful as well. But it doesn't have to be your breath. And we'll speak to after this, you don't have to be sitting with your eyes closed either. This is just one way to do it. And a lot of people find it helpful. Certainly has worked great for me. So I'll guide you in this, and then we'll talk about some other ways to do it as well. What we're gonna do is choose the breath or another anchor. So another anchor or focal point could be sensations. So kind of feeling yourself sitting on the chair, maybe feeling your hands resting on your lap, could be your feet against the floor. Sound is another great one. So just kind of noticing whatever sounds are coming into you. So if the breath doesn't feel safe or useful, that's absolutely fine. So just know that any guidance I'm giving here is just a suggestion, all right? So this time I'm going to ask us to take a moment and maybe find a position that works well for us. So again, maybe just checking in, often rolling our shoulders, which we often wear as earrings throughout the day. If we can drop those, taking your hand off the mouse or the keyboard, putting them on your lap, that's helpful. You can also stand up or lie down, whatever works for you. And then just, if it feels comfortable, just lowering your gaze down and closing the eyes again, if that feels right now. As we did before, just taking a moment to not need to do anything. How often in our day do we just let ourselves be for a moment? Maybe seeing if we can feel a sense of sort of weight or gravity. Our body is sort of pressing down against the floor or the chair. Maybe our hands resting on our legs. Just seeing what it's like to check in. Now just exploring which anchor may feel best for you today. So maybe feeling your breath coming in and out through your nostrils. Feeling that cooler air on the inhale. Warmer air as you exhale. Maybe the rising of the chest on the in-breath. That slight falling on the out-breath. Or even down at your stomach. That balloon-like muscle, the diaphragm, that expands a little as you take a breath in. And just gently releases on the exhale. Just choosing whichever spot feels maybe most prevalent for you, most supportive. Noticing where our mind may go not making that bad or wrong. Nothing wrong with being hungry, wanting an empty inbox, wanting to give your kids or dogs some attention. Totally fine. Just giving yourself permission to just be here for right now. Just for a few minutes. Feeling the expansion and contraction. Noticing wherever our attention is being drawn and acknowledging it, not just rushing away, but really noting and maybe letting it know that you hear your stomach, you hear your mind. It's okay. Thank you. I'll be right there. Just returning back. Each time trusting we are strengthening this space. Strengthening our ability to be the person and the leader we most want to be. Just seeing if we can take 3 more breaths, really intentionally. And just letting the sound bring us back. Thank you so much. So I'd love to hear, maybe we'll be moving to question and answer in a few minutes, but even before then, just to have you type in the chat what that experience was like for you. Again, this is a courageous act, right, of really being with ourselves, and we're paradoxical human beings, right? There's lots of joy and lots of sadness in us, and whatever comes up is okay. And the stronger it is, or the more, I just want to guide you to support as well. We have some resources listed on our website, and I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone. And yeah, so please, whatever your experience is like, love to hear. And it's so often that you're not alone in whatever was happening for you.
Peter, I'm seeing calming, at peace, relaxing, mind racing and tired.
Nice, yeah, absolutely.
Guilty, centered, relaxed. Every time I stop and breathe is beneficial. I love that one.
Beautiful. Ah,
yeah, great. Difficult to maintain.
Absolutely, that's good. Did anyone not have any thoughts during this practice? Did anyone have no thoughts come up? You're just, because you may actually be enlightened. We've got a job for you, so please send me an email afterwards. That would be incredible. We're all having thoughts, right? Things are coming up. Our brains are meant to do it. It's not bad. We just want to train it so that we can have a little bit more strength there. Beautiful. Thank you.
I love this one. I didn't realize how exhausted I was.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And if tiredness is the first thing that comes up and it's what you need, please go give yourself some rest. That's fine. We can meditate later, right? That's all right. It's part of the idea, is just really asking yourself, what do I need right now? Like, what is going to be most helpful? And that'll then give us capacity to ask that same question for others, right? Be of more service. So a few other things I just want to touch on. An early, really helpful resource is going through our values. right? So often we sort of do some of this work and we realize, well, I don't really know what's important to me, or I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think this PDF is going to be in the chat. I know it was in there earlier. Maybe if we can repost it. So just a really helpful exercise to go through. We do this with coaching and with a lot of our workplace work. Just wanted to share this with everybody. And then one last, I just want to speak to the other ways we can practice. So I spoke to using sound as an anchor, but we also go often right from a practice into mindful listening when we're doing this work with teams and organizations, because it can give us a whole different level of connection when we do use the 2 ears, 1 mouth rule, right? And just close our mouths and really try and be present and listen, and to see what that feels like for the other person, right? To just have permission to really be heard. So really powerful practice. Mindful walking is incredible too, and maybe I'll share a story with that during question and answer about mindful walking, but you can just pay attention to the bottoms of your feet or your legs moving or the sound around you as you're out walking. Again, no need to be still all the time. It's not necessary. Maybe my favorite practice is mindful notifications. Right? This is a great place to start. So noticing anytime your phone buzzes in your pocket or on your desk, you see a notification on your screen, those emails are coming in, just like the person in the comment said, just taking one breath and asking yourself, is now the best time to check this? Right? We get a hit of dopamine, right? That chemical that gets released every time we check a message. It feels good. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And if we're constantly letting others yank our attention around, how effective are we really being, and how much is that helping us stay focused on what's most important? That's ultimately what we're trying to cultivate through this training.
Yeah, and Peter, it feels good until you read it.
That's depending, right? Have some good people texting you too, right? That's the close friends. It's helpful. So I do want to address just for a moment, just some more of the cultural things that are happening right now. And I know many of you have been seeing Ibram's books on many of the recommended resources lists, and I'm just finishing up How to Be an Anti-Racist right now. I had read his book Stamped from the Beginning, my wife and I, a while ago, and I just love this quote that he shares at the end of the first chapter. He says, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. Again, healing ourselves so that we can then be of service and heal others. So just wanted to share this. It's really important to me, and I know Leadership Greater Hartford, Copper Beech, we're working on many different ways we can continue to support this work as it's become just so close to each of us. And it's really essential, and this is all connected to these awareness practices. So thank you. So this would be a brainstorm. We're going to do this together through some question and answer, but maybe just thinking of some of the questions that you'll ask. You know, how can we use these practices individually to help us? And how might we experiment, right, to start to implement maybe a daily habit or ritual? Habits are really important. They move from that prefrontal cortex back in the brain a little bit to help it be easier, but it takes a while, right? And then how can we utilize some of these practices at work or within our teams to really increase our leadership and effectiveness? So I'm really grateful to have had this time with you. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to answering some questions. And these are just a few of the millions of resources that are out there. Some books, some apps. We've got a podcast through Copper Beech as well. Lots of talks on there. And again, I'm happy to connect with anyone afterwards. So thank you all so much for your time and attention, and looking forward to having some more conversation. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. That was fantastic. And we'll look for folks to have questions for Peter. If you please put them in the chat box, and we will read them to Peter and further continue the conversation in that manner. So feel free.
Karen, we have one question. It says, this user says, all these tips and techniques have been excellent. During this pandemic, aka working from home, how have you used this mindfulness when you have become a robot to work, family life, and when do we fit in our me time?
Ooh.
Great question. Great question. Yeah, thank you. So exactly, I mean, this has been, I'll tell you what, initially the gratitude I had that I had some sort of practice to fall back on. I mean, those first days and couple of weeks, my system felt overwhelmed, right? I could feel my nervous system just, what is going on right now? Is the world ending? Like, what's happening? And so, you know, for me, I really tried to notice each time that became too strong for me to do anything productive. right? There would be times when I'd be trying to send emails or do some other things, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't right. So to be able to recognize that and then ask myself, what do I need? What might be most helpful, right? Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to go sit down and meditate for a few, whatever that is? So I think the first step is just noticing what our experience is so that we can actually lay down and go to sleep or reach out to a friend because we know it's important. I know some of us, have really cultivated those practices, but it has been and continues to be really essential for me. And, we've got this new wave now too, and just the hurt and compassion that comes up in me is really strong. And so it's really helpful to have sort of the self-compassion to be with that, and then hopefully be able to translate that into some action. Next step. So thank you. It's a great question.
That was an excellent question.
Peter, kind of going off on that a little bit, when some people shared in the reaction to that daily practice or that opportunity for a daily practice, that feeling of guilt came up about taking time for oneself. And you alluded to it, and Dr. Nicklin did too in our last session. Can you talk a little bit more about that self-compassion and mindfulness connection and why it's important to put our own oxygen mask on before we can be prepared to help?
Of course. Yeah, thank you, Cara. And thanks for, that's the analogy, right? And yet it still feels hard to sort of fully embrace, right? And buy into, like, is this really helping someone else? And so I guess at best I can speak to my own experience. And I alluded to it again a little bit earlier, when if I don't practice, and I guess it's been a while since there was a day when I didn't, but when I'm not taking this time for myself, and I value service very highly. I just want to be there for others and do whatever I can to help people. And if that's all I'm doing all day, and we really see this a lot with healthcare workers now more than ever, but even before the pandemic, right? Of folks and social workers and mental health workers, and so many of you on here who are drawn to this leadership work, right? It's just, I want to help as many people as I can with every ounce of energy that I have. I think for me, what I try and do is be really honest, or you saw that radical honesty piece of the healing circle, really honest about how much time giving myself, refilling my own bucket, right? Taking care of my diet, sleep, exercise, let alone meditation or anything else. How much of that is potentially going to be most useful, most effective? Spending 6 hours on the beach every day probably isn't the best way to help as many people as I can. But spending 0 minutes eating lunch or sleeping for 3 hours a night or not taking any time to move my body, it's draining me, right? Like I said before, I'm not able to send those emails. I have no energy on phone calls. So I think there's just a degree of experimentation and this radical honesty of checking in and how is what I'm doing working for me? And just trying out, all right, if you're doing none, how's 5 minutes? Let's start with 2 minutes, right? Just to do something for yourself. And then go back to it and see what that's like for you. Oh, okay, that felt pretty good. See what 10 minutes is like. And then if you're taking 3 hours a day, which I'm guessing most of you won't do, maybe you'll say, oh, I think that's enough. Maybe that's too much. I'll back off a little bit. But please try and get there as opposed to being at the place we are now, which is depleted and exhausted, no oxygen mask at all.
Right, that's a great question. Any more questions in the chat box?
Yes, Kelly would like to know, she says, please say more about that space before reacting and the tie-in to emotional intelligence.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'm wondering what you'd like to hear, or what would be a helpful sort of other analogy. So I don't know, one thing I've noticed is that I have kind of these conditioned responses to different things. I think in some scenarios, all of us is sort of this calm, composed leader. We're like, oh, this happens, no problem. I'm just going to take care of it, right? There's times when we're all great at that. And then we all have certain, again, conditioning experiences that we've had that make us really activated when something happens. For me, it's using the wrong sponge for the dishes versus the counter. I don't know why that's so hard to figure out, right? It could be anything that happens. And so again, coming back to the radical honesty and saying wow, this is a situation where I just don't have very much space right now. And we can actually utilize that experience when we sit down and practice meditating and just see if we can notice what that feeling is like. This is hard to do in the moment, right? So it's not a good place to practice when we're most activated, right? We want to practice when we're a little bit more calm, bring those scenarios up to whatever degree feels safe and comfortable and useful, and then work with it. So what do I feel? What's the root of this, right? So with the traffic example, I started to notice that I value consideration and respecting others so highly that it really bothers me when I see someone not being considerate of others. And so now when I get a little activated when someone does something, I can say, oh, wow, I'm so grateful that I care so much about considering other people. Like, how great is it that I get angry when this happens? This is a gift. And then I can calm down. And it's not this magic bullet, it's still happening in me, but it certainly helps me to strengthen that space and allow myself to just be a little bit less reactive. And then maybe the last step of this is it really changes my response, my reaction to that person, which maybe then makes them a little bit kinder in the next situation, right? If I'm angry right off the bat, then they're going to give it back to me. Their next interaction is going to be even more activated. So, and this is, I think, coming back to the other question of where when we practice, it really ripples out into each interaction that we have, right? As leaders, every action we take is showing others what's important to us, what we care about, and who we are. And so if we can continue to cultivate the values and the responses that really we want to and that are meaningful to us, those continue to ripple out into the next people and the next people. And I think there's just so much opportunity to just take one little step at a time with this, right? It's also not taking yourself too seriously and not needing to be perfect all the time, right? I'm still a jerk. I'm just recovering, right? I'm weeding it out, but it takes time. That's okay.
Yeah, Peter, can I ask you a question regarding mindfulness and leadership? We reward busyness in organizations and checklist and in get it on kind of mentality. So what can leaders do to provide mindfulness in the workplace? Because based off of those stats that you showed us earlier and the implications, it's a pretty serious thing not to incorporate mindfulness in your personal and professional life. So what could a leader do? Just one thing that they could do to make mindfulness part of the culture.
I can only give one, Karen. I mean, there's a few.
Yes, go ahead and give a few. Go ahead, feel free.
Fine. Yeah, I mean, I think knowing it's a priority, right? That's what we started this conversation with, knowing the inner resourcing and doing these practices and basically doing anything to care for ourselves and our skill set, right? And our ability to be kinder, more compassionate, to listen more deeply. So I think it starts with the leader really, and this is the biggest challenge I noticed that we have working with partners, is when there's a one person or a few people in the organization who are like, we need to be doing more of this work. We know this is essential. And usually those people have read a couple books or seen some articles, watched some videos that they've really, it's inspired them and helped them believe, like, wow, this is really possible. And I think this would be useful, practical use of my time. I think we need to bring each other on board with that, but with patience, right? It's not, you should be meditating more. Why aren't we taking this time? But how can we sort of meet people where they are and share our own experience? I think sharing from our own experience and practicing ourselves so that others say, hey, you seem a little different, or what's been happening? What have you been doing that's helped you be more calm, or you seem to be getting your emails done even more quickly? I think that can help to ripple into a little inspiration. And then being intentional about it comes to schedule. I mean, I just love using the calendar, right? If we all can block off our own time, or better yet, if you're the CEO or the executive director, saying like, I'm going to I want everyone to asking folks, put a chunk of time on your calendar that is your self-care time, growth time, whatever term is helpful. But just really making sure that this is something we're going to be doing. And then again, incentivizing folks to do it, right? I know we have like the exercise incentives through healthcare and some organizations, that's great. Finding ways to really make this, if you do this, you're going to get something for it, can help each of us create the habit. And then eventually we're feeling the benefits for ourselves, right? We don't need that incentive, but it can really help to start that way. So just a few ideas.
Yeah, and thank you. So what you're really saying is model the way.
Always.
Absolutely, thank you. Are there any other questions in the chat box?
There's one more chat that I was sent privately. Why is mindfulness in today's mindful listening in today's climate particularly important?
Mm.
I think you just answered it in the question itself, right? It is particularly important, right? So thinking of the divisiveness, right, and the tribalism that we're experiencing right now, right? And if you think of it as stacking identities, right? So we all have to either be all red or all blue. You can't have, paradox and interchange in different pieces. I think we're all just not taking the time to listen and understand a little bit more deeply. We talked about sort of this ancestral, we all want to feel healthy, safe, valued, belong, right? We all want that, I promise. Everyone's got that in us. And so if we trust that and have enough patience to take some of these maybe much harder statements and alternative facts, whatever it might be, things that we're taking in that just feel so antithetical to our beliefs and what feels right to us, if we can absorb that with kindness and trust that this person, for whatever reason, and I think it's really been helpful for me to go through this process of being a jerk, because I can see how others are being a jerk. I was doing it because I was insecure. I didn't want anyone to know how imperfect that I am. I was going to say was, but I am, right? And we all are. So to be able to, I think, to really notice what's being activated in you as folks, as words are coming at you, as statements are coming at you, and to choose to not just say something right away. There's actually some research on not the first response, not the second response, but actually the third response that comes to mind is often the one that we regret the least, right? The one that we want. So if you could be like, oh, I want to say this, or throw that one out. I want to say that, not that one. This applies to emails and the fights with friends and family members too, right? But so just being with those initial responses, trusting they're coming from a great place, and sharing them in that moment may not be the most effective way to establish some dialogue and trust so that we can actually move things forward. And these are the kind of conversations that we really want to start to foster, and that I know we're going to be working on. So keep your eyes out for more opportunities to do this. It takes a ton of courage, right? We really need to keep growing ourselves so that we have that space to do this work. So thank you for that question. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and there was a comment in the chat box that says, listening to understand fills the space between stimulus and response.
Yes. Seek first to understand before being understood. Exactly.
That's right. And Brene Brown says that you can't hate people close up. So I think the mindfulness will encourage you to really, really look. And when we have this opportunity right now where we have our face masks on, you might not see their mouth, but that might not be a bad idea, a bad thing. I mean, to look into someone's eyes and really, really see them, I think is a space where we need to go. The mirrors of the soul.
Thank you, Karen. Yes.
Okay. Do we have time for one more short question?
Okay, so Ted asked, how do you balance self-criticism with self-love?
Thank you, Ted. Imperfectly. That is imperfectly. I think "and" is one of my favorite words, right? So if anyone's done any leadership training with the improv tool of yes and, being able to acknowledge that more than one thing can exist at once, I find really helpful, right? So I'm perfect the way I am, and there's room for improvement. Like, both of those things can be true to some degree, and I have trouble even having that degree of like, I'm not perfect. I mean, there's a lot to work on, right? So that's part of what draws me to all this work personally, is I'm like, oh, I'd still love to grow these areas. But it's also why I've taken our mindful self-compassion course, and I'm learning to hold this level, because that self-love can then help us extend that to others. There's this concept that what we dislike in others, and when we get angry and upset, it's actually us projecting a part of ourselves onto that other person, which is, I mean, it's hard for me to take in sometimes too. So maybe that's a tough concept. But if we can acknowledge, like, wow, there's some of that in me too. Yeah, of course I'm not perfect. And yet the fact that I don't like this thing means that there's some other part of me that really cares about being kind and considerate and compassionate, whatever else it may be. So I think you're the one to answer that question better for me, Ted, after your life experiences. So
Yeah.
We'll talk later.
Yeah. And self-compassion is a practice that requires practice. And like Peter said, it's Kristen Neff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kristen Neff workshop that's at Copper Beech. So it's definitely one to look at because the work is hard. Work is hard. And whoever thought that self-compassion would be hard, but it's difficult for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So that ends our Q&A session. And thank you, Peter, for a wonderful presentation and wonderful Q&A. I'll hand it over to Cara to tell us some good news.
Yes, some good news. So thank you, Peter. You really made your LGH Quest cohort proud today, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge your vulnerability and your raw honesty. Let's just share a little bit of love for Peter in our chat.
Yes.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your gifts with us today. And as you alluded to, we have some exciting news that Peter and I are excited to share. We're thrilled to announce that Leadership Greater Hartford and Copper Beech are working together to inspire new generations of mindful leaders, and all current active LGH members are able to receive a 20% discount on any of the Copper Beech's programs. So this is so exciting. If you were interested and you may be dipping your toe into mindfulness from today, or you're ready to fully emerge, Copper Beech has a lot of great programs, beginning, medium, and extensive programs. So take a look on their website. We're sending that link out to the chat right now, and make sure that you use discount code LGH20. Again, this is such a great opportunity for people in our membership to continue to develop a different asset of themselves, a different part of themselves. So we hope that all of our membership will take this opportunity on, and don't forget to use the discount code. So your next opportunity to learn with us through this series is on Wednesday, June 24th. TEDx speaker and Grace Trail founder Ann Joles will present Leading with Grace in These Challenging Times. I'm very much looking forward to this session, and Karen, of course, is moderating again, and it will be excellent, and we hope that you will join us. Take that time for yourself, and it's an hour. It's just 1 hour. Come and join us. The link is in the chat. And just around the corner, we will host a Toast to TED. Our CEO and president, Ted Carroll, is retiring after 35 incredible years to leadership Greater Hartford. Join us, help us salute him, help us honor him with this celebratory Ted Carroll talk on Tuesday, June 23rd from 4:30 to 5:30. Please visit our website for more information and help us honor our past, celebrate our present, and champion our future. So please, we hope that you'll join us. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to again thank Fern for being our sponsor here today. Thank you for making this session possible, and thank you to all of our visionary sponsors for their generous support and their investment in community leadership. So thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Copper Beech. We're going to stay on the line for a couple more minutes. The chat will be open, so you can copy down all the links that we sent out. Don't worry, we are recording this session. The slides will be made available to you. So we will be sharing all those resources within the next couple of days. So please keep a lookout for those. Share them with your network. This is a free opportunity for LGH to be a part of the greater community, the greater conversation. So please share those resources with anyone that you think would benefit from them. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Karen, for moderating, and Destiny for helping with the questions.